Good morning. Welcome to FSA Live. And today we need to understand a little bit more about the e-commerce landscape, especially in Northern Caribbean. And we're going to be talking to Gail Whylie. She's a senior manager in global transaction banking at Scotiabank in Jamaica. Stick around. You're going to want to be a part of this discussion. See you soon. See you right there.
People think that this is the way things are working. So employees, team members, managers, leaders, but in actuality, there's a massive gap between what you think you're delivering and the experience that your customers are actually having on the front line.
Launching an online business needs a little bit of a mindset change. It's not just purchasing the website or the system and then sales come through automatically. There needs to be a little bit of a groundwork.
I mean, we are talking about going after the customer. This seems so obvious, but it's not. Because when you are talking in a digital world, this customer now is much more empowered. It's much more criterious. It's much more looking for real relevancy on the way that he's connecting with any engagement, any company, any product, or any offer.
Good morning and welcome to First Atlantic Commerce. Here on the FSC Live Show, we cover all things e-commerce in the Caribbean. Our guests join us from all over the Caribbean and generously share their expertise, knowledge, and insight into the digital world and how we operate within it. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, make sure to smash that like button and like and follow the page to continue seeing content that will help you grow your business online. Today, we have the great privilege to talk to Gail Whylie, Senior Manager, Global Transaction Banking at Scotiabank in Jamaica. I'm particularly interested in this conversation because it's always intriguing to hear the discussion from someone within the Caribbean. Just a little background on her. She has a bachelor's in math and economics and a master's in management information systems from the University of the West Indies at the Mona campus in Jamaica. She was a senior product manager at National Commercial Bank in Jamaica, as well as her current position, which we're going to drill her about because we want to learn as much as possible. And she has an understanding of the importance of implementing innovative solutions to businesses within the Caribbean, and a little insight on her own personal details. She's an avid Latin dancer, which is a little difficult during these times. I don't know how she's going to get her movements on, but she also loves British and criminal mysteries. So we'll delve into the mindset. And as always, I'm joined by Chris Burns. He's the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, here to help connect the dots with the technical side of e-commerce. And hey, Chris, how is it in Bermuda? Is it cold yet? You know, I'm obsessed with that.
You know what? It is a little cold here today. Jacket weather for sure. So good morning to you all. Nice to be here again. But yeah, it is. It's taking a turn, which is actually quite nice. A little break from the heat, the humidity, and just bed down for winter a little bit now.
Gail, just a little insight on that. I was just in awe that Bermuda gets cold because I was of the opinion, because of the branding Bermuda shorts, it was sunny all year round. Were you aware of this, Gail? Were you aware of this brand identity crisis?
I was not aware of it until I met Chris a couple of years ago, and I was blown away when he told me it can get pretty cold. Who knew?
Shocking. Yeah. Thank you. For those who've never been to Jamaica, is that the case in Jamaica?
Oh, no, it's still very hot here and it's November. So we're quite the opposite.
Yeah. And just again, for folks who have never been to Jamaica, can you share with us your time zone? Because that always gets me, especially when I have to book, meetings. I'm like, Jamaica is always Trinidad and Barbados and Guyana. We're all in the same time zone. Gail, school us.
Well, we're an hour behind you now, right? So
okay.
we're always an hour behind you, behind Trinidad.
Okay. Right. So lessons learned. Let's get into the space of e-commerce and just learn a little bit about how it will help our audience, which is usually small business owners. So,
okay.
Gail, can describe sort of the core features that a small business owner should be aware when it comes to the e-commerce space.
Okay. Well, the number one, it's not just, oh, I need to sell my things online. The biggest challenge that we see with small businesses is you find that they think that, okay, especially if they're moving from a physical space to the digital space, you still have to protect your store, your digital space. And I find that can be one of the hard, maybe a strong word, but that might be one of the hardest things to get across. So protecting your space, I always use the analogy of just as if you were in a physical space and you lock that shop at the end of the night, you need to ensure that your electronic space, your digital space, your virtual space is protected. Because as everybody knows, fraudsters are not sleeping. While we're sleeping, they're awake. So you need to do that extra bit to ensure that your website or your payment button or whatever it is you're doing online is well protected. I would say that is the number one. That would be my main point to get across.
And I think that's actually been a theme with our live sessions. This is episode number 4022. I can't keep count because we've done this so many times. And we've discussed, this perception around what e-commerce is, because a lot of us engage with it as consumers and say, okay, I just click checkout and Amazon's going to deliver this to my home, versus if you are on that back end, what's the biggest mistake? And this question is for Chris, that you've seen with business owners when it comes to, okay, I've made a decision, what next?
Yeah, and the biggest mistake that we see is when people don't really understand or think about the payments aspect of their online business. So they've gone out and they've built a website, or they've bought a shopping cart off the shelf, or they've used one of these sort of website creators and not really thought through, okay, how do I actually receive the money from the payment on my site? So, and that happens time and time again, because if you get a lot of these sort of bigger shopping carts or website creating programs that you see online, these sort of SaaS type products, and they're used very heavily in the US or within the EU, a lot of the times those companies haven't built or integrated to payment gateways like ourselves that connect to the banks locally within the Caribbean, so that money can settle to your local bank account, to your merchant account within the Caribbean. Now, we've done a lot of work to help fix that. So, we have plugins for things like Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, Wix, OpenCard, PrestaShop, and we have some more coming. So we've done a lot of work to try and fix that problem. But, you really need to think through everything from website creation, marketing of the website, through to, okay, how do I actually receive my money on the back end?
I muted my mic. It's 2021. We're going into 2022, and I'm probably still going to do it then, but let's just push forward. So Chris used a word there that I think that we're going to pack for a second. And it may seem like a regular smuggler word to everybody else, but within the banking space, can Gail expand on this merchant prospect? Because within the traditional and e-commerce space, people may think, I have a point of sale, I have this merchant account, I can start e-commerce. Gail, any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, as a point of sale merchant, it makes a process is somewhat similar in terms of getting your funds settled to an account. So they're accustomed to that kind of thing. But yes, we do have to explain that you may not need a separate bank account, but for efficiencies for you as the client, it would make better sense for you to have a separate MID, which is the merchant ID, as well as just for transparency and for the technical side of things, in terms of this MID will be used for e-commerce transactions only, because there are a lot of things that layer on top of that. So as a point of sale merchant, conversation is easier. As a brand new merchant, somebody who is just going into business, doesn't have a point of sale experience, then, we have to explain, connect the dots, as Chris just outlined, to say, this is what is required, so that we can take the process from somebody purchasing something on your website using their credit card, get those funds from that into your bank account. And the only way to do that is by setting up a merchant ID or a merchant account, so that the funds can be credited, and then you will be able to identify and understand where these funds are coming from. So you'll be able to easily distinguish your e-commerce deposits from your other deposits if you use that bank account for something else.
So as a small business owner, if I've decided, you know what, I'm going to head over to Scotiabank and open my e-commerce business, is it a case of you have to open up a merchant account and then an e-commerce account, or is it that you can just open up something specifically for e-commerce?
Well, first things first, you need to have a bank account, and you need to have a business account. So once we've established that you have a bank account, then you need to have a merchant account. But the merchant account is not something where you're going to go through a process like you've gone through to open your bank account. We at the bank do most of the heavy lifting, of course, with some additional information from you. So yes, you do have to sign a couple forms, not too many, but one actually. But you do need that merchant account to be able to reap the benefits of your e-commerce business. So you need to set up that separate account.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I was having some internet issues. I believe I got the majority of what you said, but I'm going to push through. Right. So when it comes to setting up your merchant account, you have your business account, and you have decided, okay, I have the right web developer, I am heading into this space. Where does First Atlantic Commerce step in there, Chris?
So once the account's been approved by Scotia, that's really when we are going to get some technical details from the bank, which is something called a sort of a merchant ID, which is basically a number that tells the overall system where to send the captured money from the website and from the credit card. And then something called a descriptor, which is basically the information that whoever's buying from your website is going to see on their credit card statement. So usually that's 24 characters. That can be alphanumeric. You want to make that really clear in terms of that it represents exactly what people are seeing on your website. So the company name and a support number. And that's really critical when it comes to avoiding any sort of chargeback issues. So if people don't see something that they recognize like immediately on their statement, that can end up in a chargeback. And if there's not a phone number on there, that's another step to leading that to be a chargeback. So once we have all that information, that's fed over to FAC and to our business development support teams. And at that point, we take over, working with the merchant to talk through all the different methods that we have in terms of integrating to the gateway. So, we talked about the shopping cart plugins earlier. And then, we have other platforms that, things like Figaro, for example, that are pre-built on the front end. So, there's a website creators, and then, you can choose Wix or Shopify or Magento, WooCommerce, any of those. Or you can come directly into our gateway via an API, so at that point, you're really going to need, a dedicated software developer that can that understands software development, that understands e-commerce integrations. And it tends to be sort of our bigger clients that go directly into the API. It does offer a lot of flexibility in terms of the way that they want to build out their site and their payment infrastructure. And then we have something called a hosted payment page, which is a page that's hosted on our servers in our environment, that when it comes time to enter the credit card information on your site, it's done so on a page that's hosted in our environment, in our secure environment. And at that point, no credit card data is passing through the merchant's ecosystem, through their network or through their server environment. And we're able to have all that data in our system because we go through something called sort of PCI compliance every year, and specifically PCI DSS level 1 compliance, which is like a financial audit. So if you were going to get audited by one of the big four, EY, KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, etc., it's like that, but on the technical side. So once you get to a certain size, you need to go through a PCI DSS level 1 certification every year. So it's about a 3-month process. They come in, they try and hack our systems, they try and make sure that our policies are all up to date, make sure there's no single source of failure, or not one person can make code changes, that sort of thing, and that there's no credit card data in clear text anywhere within the environment. So it's a really important thing that we do. It helps us sleep a little better at night. It's good for our customers and our bank partners to know that we have that certification. So another point to make for anybody that's looking for a payment partner is to make sure that they are PCI compliant, ask to see their what's called an AOC, and make sure that they have been PCI certified as a payment provider. Because there are a lot of people out there that talk about payments, but they're not actually PCI DSS level 1 certified.
That's a lot of information for those out there who may feel a little overwhelmed. That's okay. We're going to put a link in the comment section, and we do have a blog that explains everything here, because when I started this live show, I too was like, what does a payment gateway even mean? Don't worry, you'll figure it out. We all have the information on firstatlanticcommons.com/blog, and we'll put that comments in the section. So we covered quite a few things, but when it comes to the e-commerce space and this idea of, we hear Shopify, we hear Magento, we hear WooCommerce, is that something that you get involved with, Gail?
Actually, not really. So whereas, we will be aware as the bank of the different, types of systems that customers may be using, to develop their content, our main focus at the bank is to ensure that we facilitate connectivity from your website to your bank account so that you can realize those funds. So, and then we ensure that, so as Chris said, so FAC as an example, the gateway that the client chooses needs to be able to be compatible with any one of these. So that part is a very important process that the gateway plays. Very important role that the gateway plays. Because, as you can imagine, there are a myriad of different solutions out there that a client may be introduced to and, advise that it's, easy to work with and so on. And then when you get to the stage of the gateway, there is not anybody in the Caribbean who is certified to provide connectivity to that software. So it's very important to do your shopping around when you're choosing your content management system.
I want to talk more about that, because I actually know of a company that invested heavily in a solution for them to realize after the fact it's not feasible in the Caribbean. And I don't think we truly understand what that means, because you could get a little lost in translation and it's a bit technical. So I want to expand on that right after the break.
Sure.
morning, and welcome back to First Atlantic Commerce. Here on the FSC Live Show, we cover all things e-commerce in the Caribbean, and our guests join us to share their insight into the digital world that we are operating in. A lot of us have no choice but to operate in digital world. So if you're joining us on Facebook, smash that like button and you get notified the next time we go live, because I can assure you, again, this information anywhere else, I searched, I combed the internet on your behalf. Trust me on this one, because the Caribbean is a unique place and there's a lot of things that we have to learn because it's a new space that we have to learn. So I'm joined by the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, Chris. He is out in Bermuda, and our guest today is joining us from Jamaica, I believe. Gail, are you in Jamaica right now?
I am.
Okay. So Gail is the senior manager, global transaction banking at Scotiabank, and I believe Jamaica is still under state of emergency.
In terms of our curfew measures, we still have them. Yes. 8 o'clock every night for the COVID guidelines.
And I can imagine that affects a lot of businesses, not being able to service their customers at whatever particular time. I could only assume that the supermarkets and so forth, what time are they usually closed?
Right. So pre-COVID, you had some supermarkets open until 10, some pharmacies open until 11 p.m. So of course they, suffered a big blow when at first, you had the curfews. Just recently, we came out of a 3-day lockdown situation when our numbers spiked again. Now it's back to 8 o'clock. A little relaxation for them, so they can open a little later. But yes, now is when e-commerce comes in handy, because you can close your physical store, but you don't have to close your business.
Yeah, and a lot of us, and I say us very strategically, are using our credit cards as therapy. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to expand on it right now. Okay. So we actually had a poll on the First Atlantic Commerce LinkedIn page where we asked folks about which e-commerce platform that they use to sell products online. And the winner by marginal, 42% was WooCommerce, which is something that's integrated with the First Atlantic Commerce plugin. So as a business owner, you're trying to figure all these things out, and you said, okay, I'm going into this space and I found this pretty decent platform that's going to allow me to sell my stuff online. And there's this huge step that people miss. And you mentioned it earlier, Gail, but for those who may have missed it, what is that? Where do they look? Where do they ensure that this particular platform that they're using is going to be able to integrate with their bank?
Well, first of all, when you come to us, so if clients come to us, or if we seek out clients, or if clients are referred to us, the first thing we're going to do is, so we have a processor, because I'm trying not to get too technical, but we have a processor that processes transactions. And so gateways like Chris, First Atlantic Commerce, they need to be compatible with our processor. They need to be certified with our processor. So once they come to us, we have to know what gateway they're using, because that could be another step that is another step that decides whether we are able to work with you. Have you chosen that gateway already, or are you shopping around? Because if it is not compatible with our processor, then we wouldn't be able to, move forward. The good thing is that the processor that we use, which is Fiserv, there's a long laundry list of, compatible systems and gateways. So that's the advantage, but it is important to have that initial conversation so that, you can determine ahead of time, are we compatible with this potential system, gateway, even as I said, the content management system, because we would know, okay, well, an FAC would be compatible with these systems, and we know that FAC is compatible with our processor. So you have to have that upfront conversation. And then the conversation gets even more in depth with FAC and the client to ensure that, what method of e-commerce are they thinking of implementing? Is it a full API? Is it a payment button? Do I only want to be on Instagram? Do I only want to be on WhatsApp? That kind of thing.
Okay. And for those who may have gone into, let me talk to the web developer first before having a discussion with my bank. What are some of the pitfalls that they are going to encounter, Chris, on your end? What have you seen? What's the sort of the biggest falls that we as entrepreneurs are doing trying to get on e-commerce platforms?
Yeah, I think it's, from a general platform perspective, a lot of them, if you're not using it for payments, then a lot of these platforms are going to work for you. It's really, but the purpose of a lot of the websites are to actually sell goods and services, not just to be informational. So if you want to, take payments in there, that is the main pitfall, right? People are going to go and talk to the developer and they say, great, yep, I can integrate, I can build it for you, I can do everything for you. But they fail to have that conversation about payments, and that is, as you mentioned before, that's where people really get unstuck. So, you have to really figure out what you want to do with that site, where you want to get paid, which bank you want to work with. So, Scotia has been I think he's our oldest bank partner throughout the Caribbean. We've worked with them for a very long time. We understand, what types of businesses they will or won't accept. They were one of the first banks to enable e-commerce within the region. So, it's a very important partnership between our two organizations, and we continue to grow that. They're a regional bank. They are, very sort of proactive when it comes to e-commerce business. And that is something that we continue to promote throughout our platform. But and I think the banking part of it, not all banks are created equal when it comes to e-commerce as well. So it's not every bank in the Caribbean has what we call an e-commerce acquiring license, and that's a special license that you have to get from the card associations, so Visa or MasterCard, to be able to accept e-commerce transactions as a bank. So even just the gateway side alone, which you have to figure out whether your bank is going to accept, is able to accept e-commerce transactions. And Scotia is, is one of the longest standing banks within the region that has been providing e-commerce merchant accounts within there. So they know it, they understand that, it's not, a lot of, it's not this just sort of wall of noise in terms of promoting e-commerce. There is a deep understanding of how this business works. And, that's important as you get more established as an e-commerce business, because, you need to understand your settlement times, you need to understand chargebacks, you need to understand your fraud risk. And, therefore you need to work with the bank, on the back end that is going to be able to support you all the way through that process.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the Magettos and the WooCommerce, and I don't want to assume that everybody understands or knows, especially within Trinidad and Tobago. We're having an issue with Forex, aka we don't have enough of it. I don't know if it's the same in Scotiabank, Gail. I mean Scotiabank, sorry, in Jamaica.
Well, the dollar has been, it's not like your dollar. It has been devaluing. It's revalued a little. But we generally have availability.
Okay. All right. So it's different problems, right?
Different
different
problems,
territories.
yes.
Yes. And when it comes to accepting payments online, we don't necessarily think about what that currency looks like as a consumer, unless it's more money that we actually have. But from a business perspective, that transaction and the currency in which it's being processed is important. So I don't know who's going to take this question, but why is it important to understand the currency conversation?
Well, I can certainly tell you from a gateway perspective. We are a multi-currency gateway, so we operate in 32 different countries around the world now, and we're able to accept US dollar and local currency in just about every country that we operate in, and in some places we can do multi-currency authorization with settlement to a single currency. So, but what you have to consider with that is, if you are a merchant in Jamaica, for example, and you're accepting, everything is priced in Jamaica dollars, and somebody comes and uses a US issued US dollar credit card on their site, so they're going to get charged ultimately the US dollar equivalent on their card. And because it's an international transaction, the bank that issued that card is likely to put some sort of forex fee and maybe an international transaction fee on top of that transaction. So the reason that's important is because sometimes people will query that transaction because they don't recognize the amount on their card statement, because maybe they haven't purchased overseas before, or they haven't purchased something from Jamaica before, and they're unfamiliar with how that conversion happens. So that is something to talk to your customer service teams about, so they have ready-made answers if people call in and ask about why the amount is different than maybe they've seen on the website.
Yeah, and just to add to what Chris said, it's not only an e-commerce issue, it can be a point of sale issue as well, because you're going to have clients who have their cards. It may not be issued in the country that you're actually transacting in. So, based on the currency of your card, generally you're always going to be charged in the currency of your card. But if where you're using the card uses a different currency as their local tender, then you're going to have that exchange difference. And so if you are, most of the merchants, let me use Jamaica. In Jamaica, they settle in US and they settle in Jamaican dollars. So if somebody comes onto the website with a US issued card, there is typically no issue, right? If they come on with a Canadian issued card and the merchant settles in US, then you're going to have a little difference. Same, Japanese yen, or, whatever it may be. If there's a difference in the currency of the card vis-a-vis the currency that the merchant is settling in, whether it be Jamaican or US, then you're going to have that difference. If it's the same currency, if your card is in the same currency, then you have no difference. So generally, that's the rule of thumb. I would explain that to merchants as well, because some merchants want the capability to only settle in Jamaican or settle in both. Typically, though, you find that they settle in both currencies. Especially if you're a small business that has to import goods, then it would suit you to settle in US dollars because you can buy those goods easily, right? So there are different things like that to consider, but generally that's the rule of thumb.
I feel that's such great insight, because it's more along the lines, in addition to what you're accustomed in a brick and mortar, these are different, sort of a different approach to how you are getting sales. And that's such an interesting perspective and knowledge for a lot of small business out there. So we want to discuss trends, because I remember we had Vivienne on from Cool Market in Jamaica, and that is more of a marketplace. But I really want to understand what you're seeing, Gail, within the Northern Caribbean and the e-commerce space. But we're going to address that right after the break.
Sure.
Hi, Hi, welcome back, and thank you for joining First Atlantic Commerce. The FAC Live show covers all things e-commerce in the Caribbean. And if you're watching this on the replay, don't forget to smash that like button, on LinkedIn. You're guaranteed to get some insight into the world we're currently living in, which is online business. Because if you don't have it online, unfortunately, you have a big gap that you need to fill. Today, we have a great privilege to talk to Gail Whylie, the Senior Manager, Global Transaction Banking at Scotiabank in Jamaica, as well as my co-host and the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, Chris Burns, who is joining us from Bermuda, and Gail is in Jamaica. So this is truly a Caribbean conversation because I am in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Trinidad. Can't be both islands. All right. So just before the break, we were talking about trends because we want to stick on a conversation within the Northern Caribbean. And we had a very insightful conversation with Vivian earlier this year about marketplace and the growth of that within the business in Jamaica. Is there any insight you can share with us, Gail, when it comes to the e-commerce space and the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, so we are seeing more of those. But I mean, we are really seeing a growth in just individual businesses as well, especially in the small business segment. And, that's something that we're happy for. And, we want to do everything we can to encourage that safely and securely. But yes, I would say that there are marketplaces coming up more so than before, but there has been even I opened my eyes because this year was a particularly good year for not only Jamaica, but, Bahamas, when you saw those merchants trying to get online. So there is still quite a bit of interest for individual businesses representing themselves, not being part of a marketplace, showing interest in being a merchant in a digital space.
That's some great insight. And when it comes to the Caribbean, we kind of a little bit dispersed. We don't necessarily come together unless it's cricket. And even then, it's a bit questionable. We're
not going to get into that.
Yeah, I'm just like, why did I say that? Especially now. Why did I say that? Okay, moving along. Chris,
yeah, we don't want to sidetrack the show.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about that, Chris, but we'll have to talk about that off air because it will get too heated for the First Atlantic Commerce LinkedIn and Facebook pages.
No, West Indies is heavily followed here too. So,
well, there's conversation around retirement and who should be retired and who shouldn't. Again, not going to touch it. Moving on. When it comes to the northern and southern parts of the Caribbean, as we mentioned earlier with we were talking about the currency, because in Trinidad we do have an issue with access to US. And I know a lot of islands may be a little different because they're tourism focused and a lot of folks are pushing the digital visa for US, and North American tourists. So we are experiencing different problems. And with your bird's eye view, Chris, can you give us sort of a little difference between the trend you're seeing with North versus South Caribbean?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk about these sort of digital nomads as well, we just, Bermuda's had a program very similar to the one in Barbados recently. And so, we've been trying to attract, international people that aren't necessarily tourists, because the tourist industry has been tremendously impacted over the last 2 years, but the digital nomad type program has quite a significant impact on the economy when people come and move their families and live for a year or then extend for 2 years, or they like what they see and they move there full stop. So we're certainly seeing that as one of the trends. But when it comes to the actual e-commerce business, where we see the biggest growth over the last couple of years, certainly Trinidad and certainly Jamaica. So when we look at those two territories for us and the amount of new business that has been generated from those two countries. It's really significant across the region. So, in terms of the types of businesses, there is a lot of opportunity around the sort of the micro and the SME space, where people's lives have changed dramatically, and their jobs have changed dramatically. And I think when this whole sort of shift into work from home and not having to go to the office all the time, and people spending more time thinking about what they're actually doing with their career. We've seen this topic about the sort of the great resignation that's happening in other parts of the world as well, where people are just they're not prepared to do those office jobs anymore, and they want to create something themselves that they can be proud of, that they can own. And e-commerce in general really helps people do that, because you don't need a massive infrastructure to be able to create your own business. And a lot of people have had these ideas in the past, but maybe they just haven't had the bandwidth to deal with it because of the way that they have been working previously. But now that people are at home and spending a lot more time at home, they've had that extra opportunity to think about what they're doing and what's important to them and what their values are, and really what they want to do with the next 5 or 10 years of their life. So e-commerce is played a massive role within that, because it allows you to open up that business relatively easy at a low cost point and sell to lots of people easily, whether that's domestically or internationally. But the marketplaces you touched on before, there's a lot happening with that in Jamaica, and equally there's a lot happening with that in Trinidad as well. So you see, Trinidad had up to 30 different marketplaces open within the last 2 years. I mean, obviously the space is not big enough to support all of those, and some will get it right and some won't. But it's indicative of the mood and the entrepreneurship that we're seeing within the region now, and the acceptance of e-commerce as a really viable way to grow your business and to pay. People are starting to accept it in terms of, we don't fear this anymore. We realize we don't have to stand in line anymore. We realize we can have things delivered to our door, and all the convenience and ease that brings with it.
You said standing in line, and a little bit of me just kind of, my heart raced, because it's just the idea of it feels like it's like a traumatic experience. But yes, completely see that. And even, we talk about the great resignation as it relates to the folks who are making, the millennials, me and older. But there's also this group who are like my sister, and this was not planned, Gail. This was not something I set out to do. But we were in Scotiabank yesterday, and she opened her first bank account, and she experienced the mobile app, and she was quite impressed. And she said when the woman was helping her, she's like, "Oh, you're young, you could do this, you could learn this pretty fast." So she was very impressed by it. And I couldn't help but think she's going to live a life where there's no need for her to have an 8 to 4. There would be no need for her to figure out, how am I getting into the office on time? And her needs are going to be different than mine is as it relates to access to her money. So, can you talk a little bit about that within the Scotiabank space in the e-commerce industry? And, maybe some insight on the future of it?
Okay, well, I wanted to make a point. Just coming off of what Chris was saying, just to say too that for merchants who have both a physical space and an e-commerce space, and as he said, lining up, we've also seen where merchants offer a reduced price online. Like if you pay online vis-a-vis going into the store, it benefits the consumer. So there is also that spin-off, and gradually that's where clients see, well, wait, I can scale back on my physical operations and move into more digital. But yes, congratulations. Tell your sister, welcome. We love to have her. So, mobile banking, internet banking, it's a little different, and it's interesting you brought that up, because clients sometimes mix up the two. and they're very different. Internet banking only has to do with the money that you have, the accounts you can access, and you can make bill payments and whatever it is that your bank offers as an internet banking product. You typically cannot buy anything from anybody unless you're going to be physically at a store putting your card into a point of sale machine or going online with that card. So that's a big difference, right? But we have seen just digitally where, it is a tremendous difference pre-COVID and now, where clients have totally decided to, let me make the shift. I was a little suspicious before. I don't have the time to set it up. I feel more comfortable, culturally. We like to touch and feel and, have that physical relationship with somebody. But no, it is a really mammoth shift. And I would say it's a big advantage of COVID where, both retail consumers and business clients realize, I can trust this digital world. I can be more efficient. I can be more safe, doing my transactions via my internet banking app, whether it's, the website or the mobile app, and by extension of that e-commerce. And you do find that the correlation is, if you were a little hesitant before, you tried out internet banking and you become very comfortable, then it's not a big leap into the e-commerce space. So I would say that is a they're kind of married when you look at it like that, but they are different in what they can provide.
I have a generational divide question from my generation to you, right? What is it? What does this need to touch and feel? Why is that so important? And do you think that's going to remain important?
I don't know if I am the best person for that because I love the digital world. But I just think, and I think you're right, the generation now, they don't need it as much. But remember that, we serve as a bank a wide cross-section of clients. And so, there are people that have had to make that adjustment. And culturally, they like to sit and talk and they like to, they only get to see maybe their business banker when they go in to see them. And, they have established that type of relationship. Those relationships still, account for quite a bit of, how comfortable you feel with your banker and so on. It is important. But I think what is interesting now is that we're seeing that there is a different way to maintain those relationships. It doesn't have to be a physical interaction anymore, or can it be in the same way that it used to be? So, I think going forward, we will see less and less of it because the truth is, everybody is born knowing how to use a tablet and, their go-to is the virtual world. So we will see less and less of it, but it's just a different way of how relationships will form and we learn a different way to maintain them.
Yeah. If I can add to that as well. So, and I think it depends on what you're actually doing at the bank as well, right? So if you're simply depositing money or withdrawing money or, catching a check, God forbid you should have a check, that is one thing, right? So, and that is, all the technology exists to be able to remove you physically having to do that. But if it's about the relationship, sort of Gail touched on there in terms of, if you need to talk, business planning with your business banker or whoever that might be within the organization, there's still just elements of that you cannot replace without seeing somebody for, face to face and spending that time with them. I'll give you an example. So, I just did my first business trip in a long time. With one of our large bank partners in Central America. And, we spent, breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything for 2.5, 3 days. And the amount that we achieved in doing that in person far outstripped, a weekly call that we would have. And it's because you're able to focus and be able to talk to them, and people still need and crave those personal relationships with people that they do business with. So whereas I think there are elements that should be completely replaced digitally, there is certainly other parts of it that you cannot and probably should not replace completely with digital versus in person.
And I would just add to that, especially when you're just starting out, when you're initiating that relationship, maintenance of it non-physical is a lot easier than just to start it totally virtual, which we've had to do in some instances because of the situation now. But I would say, yes, that initial meeting, that initial, the start of something new, there is really a lot you garner from that, that physical interaction.
I have a question about checks. When was the last time either of you wrote a check?
20 years ago.
Oh, well, I can safely say at least 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I always had difficulty
I've never
with
been
them.
one for checks.
Yeah, I never got the signature the same way because I signed based on my mood.
And then there is always, will the person deposit the check? No. You know what I mean? I don't want to have to keep checking. Am I going to remember? And then God forbid be embarrassed because I forgot. So yes, I don't miss it.
Okay, so a little prediction question here. Do you think it's eventually going to be phased out?
I think so. I think that is where we should be heading. It is costly for businesses, for it's more costly. It's just more costly all around to conduct business via check vis-a-vis electronic, and there is fraud to it as well. So why have to put in measures to mitigate against that kind of fraud when you can just totally eliminate it?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll check back this recording in 10 years and I'm like, Gail said it. She said it. All right. So we're going to go on a quick break. But before we do, the question we're going to answer now on our way back is, what predictions can you make on the future of commerce? We want to look at Northern Caribbean because we do have a lot of folks that watch us up the islands, as they would say. So we'll answer that question when we come back. Welcome back to the FAC Live Show. I'm sure that covers all things e-commerce, and we're specifically talking about the Caribbean. Today, we're having a Caribbean conversation with my co-host, Chris Burns. He is the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, as well as our guest, Gail. She is the Senior Manager, Global Transactions Banking at Scotiabank in Jamaica. And Nigel wants to chime in on the conversation we're having. And he says, like my CAC costs, we only stopped writing checks yesterday. What does CAC cost? Just for those who may not know. I don't know. What does that mean?
I was wondering the same thing, actually.
And it was just me. Nigel, elaborate on that. No, so we'll come back. But we clearly predicted your future as well. All right. So we want to make some predictions. They have folks who their whole jobs are called futurists. So with your knowledge, I want to start with Chris. Any predictions as it relates to the future of e-commerce within Northern Caribbean? Because I think you kind of mentioned it with the digital nomad visa. So
yeah, I think, what we're going to see is, just more and more adoption of digital, right? And that can take a few different forms. So there's the standard, e-commerce format that we're familiar with now, with sort of Visa, MasterCards or branded debit cards. In Jamaica and Trinidad, you're starting to see, the local debit cards being branded as well. So that creates an even wider audience, right? So, before, if credit card penetration rate in Trinidad is only 15%, but most people have a Lynx card, or in, Jamaica, a Jets card, a multi-link card, suddenly you have access to a lot more customers online because they have that product that they can actually pay with. But digital also transitions into, point of sale. So we're seeing, a lot more of our partners implement sort of QR codes as payment methods, and tied to like a digital wallet that's pre-funded with cash. Or we've been doing a lot of work in payment kiosks in terms of walking up to a physical kiosk and paying with your card and paying off your different bills, your flow bill or whatever that might be within that environment. And then you can't get away from the whole sort of cryptocurrency stablecoin conversation. It's really something that is ever present now. It's a complicated subject for some people, and for a lot of people actually. And it's really trying to figure out the value of accepting cryptocurrency versus holding cryptocurrency as an item of creating wealth. And then these sort of stable coins that we're seeing introduced and that are issued by central banks, like in Bahamas, you have the Sand Dollar. In Eastern Caribbean, you're seeing Dcash. You have companies like Bit that are promoting a lot of technology within that space. So it's and you see in Central America, El Salvador, the government there is mandating that every merchant has to accept Bitcoin. And then provided everybody with a Bitcoin wallet and preloaded it with $30. So trying to sort of force that adoption, which is a little strange because it's a decentralized technology being forced by a central authority. So it can get complicated, but you have to, if you're thinking about online, you're thinking digital, you have to start considering where digital currencies and cryptocurrencies fit into your long-term strategy.
I am still trying to figure out this crypto thing. I probably will catch it in the next 20 years. Nigel responded. He said the customer acquisition cost, Pauline, data from one of your previous broadcasts. Yes, we did have that conversation. How much does it cost to have one customer, which is just smart move, Nigel, smart move. All right, Gail. So give us your prediction on the future of e-commerce in the Northern Caribbean.
Yes, it's not going anywhere. It's only going to grow. As in the Caribbean, we're behind North America. We're catching up. We were behind in terms of, both number of clients that trusted it to go on it, both in terms of consumers and businesses who wanted to enter into that space. And we see where that is changing and has changed dramatically over the last 2 years. So we expect that momentum will just, double, triple. It's really going to multiply, and I expect it to at least double by next year, just based on what we've been seeing. And I mean, like everything else, took us a little, I remember when, just a little in the physical world now, where we had credit cards, and you had to swipe your card. And, we came in with the new technology of a chip card. And this technology had been around in the UK for a long time, forever. I mean, we introduced it within the last 2-3 years, and we were, 10, 15 years behind our counterparts in the North. But we're here now, and we've adopted it well, and we're moving on. And sped up by COVID, influenced by COVID, e-commerce, we would have gotten here anyway, but I think that the pandemic really kind of escalated how quickly that happened. And I think all of us have a role to play in just, participating in that momentum, ensuring that our customers, both on the consumer side, the cardholder side, and the merchant side, continue to trust the system, and it's only going to grow. That is a trend that we've seen that trend, and we haven't seen anything that suggests that there will be a downturn anytime soon. Quite the opposite.
That's such a great place for us to end, because I find a lot of times we tend to get this negative well, we actually lump everything together. We lump social media, e-commerce, digital marketing, live shows. We lump everything together and we say, this thing is negatively affecting our lives. But you rightfully said it's not going anywhere. And what are we going to do next? And I think that's a great place for us to end this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today. Shout out to Chris, who is out in Bermuda, and he is the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, as well as Gail, who is joining us from Jamaica, and she's representing Scotiabank. Be sure to join us on the 23rd of November at the same time, same place. In our next discussion, we are going to learn about how you can benefit from the digital economy in the Caribbean from Stephen Price. He is the VP and General Manager at Flow. So you don't want to miss that discussion. And as always, be sure to like and follow the LinkedIn page to learn more and be notified when we go live next. Enjoy your evening or morning or whenever you're watching this, because you might be watching this on a replay, and have a good one. Bye, guys.